You're watching France 24 with me, Angela DIFFLEY. Good to have you with us on the 6th day of the truce between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Both sides are still in negotiations brokered by Qatar on whether or not to renew the ceasefire and its hostage and prisoner exchanges. If not, today will be the last day of the deal. Meanwhile, Israel says it has received a list of hostages set to be released today. Well, here is Majed Al-Ansari. He is the spokesperson for the Qatari Ministry of Foreign Affairs, talking about the negotiations on extensions.
Main focus right now is, and our hope is, to reach a sustainable truce that would lead to further negotiations and eventually to an end to this iteration of violence, to this war. And we have always said that we need the push of the whole international community to make sure that that happens. However, we are working with what we have. And what we have right now is a provision to the agreement that allows us to extend days as long as Hamas is able to guarantee the release of at least 10 hostages from their side.
And meanwhile, Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, has also been stressing today, he has stressed the importance of a definitive resolution to the conflict.
Intense negotiations are taking place to prolong the truce, which we strongly welcome. But we believe we need a true humanitarian ceasefire. And we must ensure the people of the region finally have a horizon of hope by moving in a determined and irreversible way towards establishing a two-state solution on the basis of United Nations resolutions and international law, with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security. All hostages must be released immediately and unconditionally.
Antonio Guterres, well, of course, negotiations are underway and have been all through the day over any possible extension to that ceasefire, allowing, of course, more time for humanitarian aid to reach ordinary Gazans and also the release of some hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Israel has said clearly on many occasions that it will resume the war until all of its aims are achieved. Now, those objectives are the return of all the hostages and the destruction of Hamas. So there will never be a repeat of October the 7th. Then, of course, there's the huge unanswered question of who will govern Gaza once the dust has literally settled. Well, I want to look at some of those issues now, and to do that, we're joined on the line from London by Oliver McTernan, who is director of an organisation called Forward Thinking. That's an organisation that works on conflict resolution. First of all, thank you so much, Mr. McTernan, for your time this evening. We do appreciate it. I want to start by asking you about these negotiations over a ceasefire extension. How do these kind of negotiations work?
Well, in a normal situation, you would have two groups in the same building with a mediator going from one to the other. So there's less chance of misinterpretation or anything getting lost in the translation, as we may say. I think in this particular case, the Qataris are doing a remarkable job because they're caught up in a very complex process where, as we understand, there are 5 or 6 parties involved. First of all, you have Hamas political wing, then you have the Hamas military wing. There's got to be communication there. You've got Israel, you've got America, and you've got Egypt also involved. So I think if they pull off an extension of the truce, it will be a remarkable achievement on their part.
You don't sound particularly optimistic. What have we learnt on this sort of thing from similar conflicts?
Well, I think this one has a peculiarity of its own, and that is being shaped by the fact that right from the beginning, I think Israel, under Mr. Netanyahu's leadership, has set it incompatible objectives. You can't say on the one hand, I'm going to eliminate Hamas, and on the other hand, say I'm going to negotiate with Hamas for the safe release of all the hostages. I think it's obvious that those two objectives are incompatible. Now, it's becoming clear to me that as time goes on, Hamas are finding it more and more difficult to actually locate the civilians that were taken, because as we understand, not just did Hamas fighters cross into Israel on the 7th of October, but so did a number of other groups, including some of the criminal gangs from northern Gaza. So in order to be able to locate, first of all, and then to make sure that the process of gathering them in a safe place is safe and they are protected from harm, I do think you do need longer than a day at a time ceasefire. My hope would be that there would be a pause to enable the collection of the hostages in safe places, and then resume the process on the 10-a-day. And hopefully that will lead to what we all desire, a permanent ceasefire.
So many people are just looking at the wider picture beyond these negotiations on whether or not to extend a ceasefire. So many people have invested so much effort in trying to resolve this conflict with not a great deal to show for it. Why is it so intractable?
Well, I think it's intractable because there's never really been a serious effort to resolve it in a durable way. Oslo, in my opinion, was a disaster because it was imposed from outside. It was a top-down solution. The indigenous Palestinian peoples that were there through all of the occupation weren't involved in that process. Now, I come from Ireland, and on the island of Ireland, we had to learn a very hard way that, first of all, these type of conflicts cannot be settled by military means. They require a political process. But more important, that political process has to be inclusive. All the parties with constituency, all the parties that are part of the problem have to be part of the solution. And that's never happened in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I do hope that this will be the end of the cycle of violence we've witnessed over years, especially since 2005, when Gaza was separated from the rest of the West Bank, the occupied territories. I do hope that this will be the end, and on two levels, on the level of Israel and the level of Palestine inclusively, and then the international level, there will be a real serious effort to once and for all to find a solution where both peoples can live with commitment to each other, commitment to peace and the prosperity of the region. I think that is achievable, but it requires a political commitment on all sides to achieve it.
That's in the longer term, in between extending or not a ceasefire and that working towards a durable peace. What sort of situation do you see for who is governing Gaza after this war ends and before there is a durable peace?
Well, I think more important than addressing that issue is for us to look at what is actually happening. I was in Berlin yesterday, and the German foreign minister made the comment that we're seeing the rule-based international order crumbling. It's disappearing because we're not adhering to it. So I think that's the first thing. We've got to, the Secretary General we just heard describe Gaza at present as an epic catastrophe. Well, I think first and foremost, we've got to say, let's put an end to the fighting. Let's have a permanent ceasefire. Secondly, who governs Gaza, that should be a decision of the Palestinian people alone, the Palestinian people in Gaza, in East Jerusalem, and in the West Bank.
But of course, Israel will need to have its security guaranteed. It can't run the risk of October the 7th happening again.
Yes, but its security will lie in having good relationships with its neighbor, the Palestinian people. That's where the security will be. We've discovered that security doesn't exist in high fences, in automatic guns and everything else. It's a false security. And the risk of that sort of security, it breeds further and even worse sort of forms of resistance and terrorism. So I think Israel, of course, has to be part of this discussion. Whatever is agreed has to be acceptable also to the Israeli people. But I think until we move away from the military mentality and think that we can solve these issues by the gun and by the bomb and the shell, and move into a realization that these are human problems, it's essentially a grievance problem, and grievance problems are solvable provided you have the right mechanism and the right process. And I repeat again, that must include all the parties, including the far right in Israel, the national religious groups. Their feelings and aspirations must also be accommodated. They're not incompatible. People have to learn to make the compromises that are necessary to be able to live in peace and harmony.
OK, well, we'll have to leave it there. We're out of time. I want to thank you very much, Oliver McTernan, there, the director of Forward Thinking, which is a conflict resolution organisation. Thank you very much for his thoughts on that.